Christ. Oh Christ, another rant of the year. Let's get over what I thought about 2020 for the standpoint of WWE. Well, COVID has hit hard in many of our entertainment and sports events or public events or in personal businesses. Guess who is still able to do WrestleMania, monthly pay-per-views, continue with an active workplace over the standpoint of the pandemic? You gotta give it up to WWE for that. That didn't mean that the shows were good. Most of them were standpointly average, with letting indie schlock and boring character motifs, main event shows with at least average storytelling. I can at least pinpoint that there's been more memorable storylines over the standpoint of 2019 than 2020, because at least I remember some storylines from 2020. Otis trying to get Mandy Rose over the last 5 months of basic storytelling over a decent ending at WrestleMania. They actually had a decent conclusion. Then they thought of pushing Otis to the moon. Like, the guy went over being a threat for Braun Strowman for like a month when he won Money in the Bank. Then nothing happened for the last 6 months. Going to this back and forth comedic BS with Miz until they made him drop the briefcase with back at Hell in a Cell. What a devaluation of a gimmick. It's supposed to be something as cool as to push that exact guy that's going to be the next future top dude in the company. That worked for Edge, that worked for CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, The Miz, of all people. Now instead of giving it to the next big thing, they give it just to the next sort of popular dude that had a bit of a push, but not completely over, or at least had a semblance of momentum. Otis had at least one decent storyline at the moment, other than him being retarded and fat. And The Miz just is borderline always up in mid-card purgatory. He will never be treated as essential as a main eventer. Another thing that sucked, Braun Strowman that year. Braun Strowman just shows when you have what it looks to be a main eventer, and you have no charisma, promo skills, or at least an attention to actually getting most reactions or storytelling, you'll be successful. I mean, at least they got what we wanted, but most people that complain, they think it was too late too soon for Braun Strowman to even have a successful 2020. He came around beating Goldberg after being the replacement guy to face Goldberg for the Universal Championship, after Roman Reigns had to block out because he didn't want to die. And of course, he came around having feuds with The Fiend for the last 3 months with crappy pay-per-view build, until it blocked over in a triple threat match, with Roman Reigns picking up the win at Payback to become Universal Champion. Literally being the only reason why SmackDown's watchable today. The tag division was thin as hell in 2020. I thought they were going to expand it when they had the Authors of Pain rolling up in a faction with Seth Rollins. You still had Anderson and Gallows before they released everybody. Holy shit. Just the whole butchering of what meant to be a tag division. And you just have the New Day, Uso, Miz and Morrison scratching up TV time with the Street Freaking Profits. The most of these guys barely had any semblance of a fun outtake over to the show. Their matches were always sometimes entertaining, but it was the repetitive sync that sometimes they don't even sell their moves until you see actual experienced vets go over it. And it just felt like that it was so transitional. It never felt like this was the next big thing. And I thought I was going to have that when I heard that the Forgotten Sons were going to be pushed up to the main roster on SmackDown, where their tag division was just Heavy Machinery, Lucha House Party, the New Day, and one half of the Usos. So okay, fine, we can add this. Yet I was always thinking that Okay, probably it'd be better if we just unify the tag team belts because how like what we have like what total like 8 tag teams and two brands. That's not going to be at least enticing enough to watch the rest of the show, especially when your tag teams barely anybody can name other than the Usos and New Day. Another thing that sucked about 2020 for WWE, just the ongoing lack of the importance of the brand split. If you thought the wild card effect would, kind of denounce the importance that we need to keep shows separate, it was a lack of, intuition and any semblance of uniqueness for both shows because they both have tag team belts. They can both use the women's tag team and have their own women's belts. There's no individuality other than the difference of the time slot that they're in. One ends at 3, one ends in 3 hours, one ends in 2 hours. And over most of the standpoint that we've been getting, the shows are just both blandly just undergoing. They're just wrestling right now for these fans. They try to sometimes go for a tone shift, like when Bray Wyatt was caught on fire. But people wouldn't believe, like they'll put a human being on fire, then just do Make-A-Wish BS garbage. It's just inconsistent. The tone shift they want to be over with doing bullcrap skits with Miz and Morrison, then try to go over a tone shift like The Fiend doing, like trying to choke out somebody, or what Roman Reigns doing with Jey Uso. Like, stick to a tone. If you want to make it with average jokes, but keep it in this adult tone that you're trying to make guys look like badasses, I'd rather stick with that. That's obviously what most people want to watch. They don't want to watch Miz and Morrison hurling it down with their terrible improv BS, where it looks like they can barely hit over the punchline, and John Morrison, instead of being like this charismatic, sexy, like disco-like dude that can do parkour crap, he comes around being the Miz's hype man. Why? It's dumb. It's weak, and it doesn't make Miz look as legitimate as when he had the freaking Miztourage. Now most of these guys are released. Oh, by the way, the multiple guys released. By God, the summer of, like, firings. Even though, like, some of these guys deserve to be fired, because most of them weren't even doing much, it just proved, like, how rough it is in 2020, especially how this whole how this whole disease was, like, affecting most workers. And of course I understand the cut cost motif. If you're just gonna have multiple of these employees going to the same building, and if that's possible, why not just get rid of the brand split? So yeah, there's literally no point, especially with the influx of a lack of roster and with the lack of depth. You can't separate it and keep ricocheting over guys that are not going to be having that much screen time. So just get rid of it. I understand how tough it is to, have a big thing like COVID coming affecting a lot of people, and it's coming around affecting people getting jobs, and just seeing guys like Sarah Logan, Mike Chioda, Ethan Carter III, Anderson and Gallows, the Authors of Pain, freaking Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins. All of these guys, but Nia Jax still isn't employed. Like, what is Nia Jax's positives in the company? Another thing worse than firing over 30 people, even a freaking referee, keeping Nia Jax on the main roster. Now, if you don't remember, over most of the year, I have had several videos individually flagging on this chick because she's had the ineptness to be better at working, be better at trying to actually keep most of the co-workers that she's working with in the ring safe. Kairi Sane has suffered 2 head injuries, a neck injury, over having one-on-one matches with Nia Jax, and most of these things were leaked before the tape of Monday Night Raw. She's a plus-size model, or just a soft way to say she's fat, plus she's modeling. She has no semblance of a threatening motif into her other than she's a relative of The Rock. And she just sucks in the ring. She can't even do a Samoan drop correctly. Her mobility is restricted up to her freaking waist size. She's not that unique at all. She has the beast motif with beauty thing other than it looks like she takes lipo in the face with a fucking Michelin Man marshmallow body. And I don't know why Brad Rules finds her that attractive, even though she looks like if Umaga just just turned trans. It's just disgusting, man. I'm not used to like flagging on wrestlers like this since Jack Gallagher, since his stupid look. But you know, Nia Jax sucks. Everybody noticed that she's unsafe in the ring. She doesn't seem to have that much respect for most of her workers, and then she comes around disrespecting freaking Ronda Rousey, all because Ronda Rousey is saying is true. She's a UFC chick. She's going to mop the floor with chicks like her, and yet Vince keeps her out of like guys like Keith Lee. That at least he's finding chances to develop. Not on Nia Jax, that's been getting ragged on her unsafe worker, her snowflake crap, her crap fan base. Just absolute garbage. She just sucks. And she's been most of the negatives on videos of just being an absolute piece of shit. I have noticed a lot of unsafe workers over moments of being green. But at least Brie made that one mistake. Brie is not the most impressive wrestler, but she knows she can work on. She's an average worker and she can work well. It was just that one injury that she had on. I think that was Liv Morgan. Over a knee strike that she accidentally hit her for real in the nose, and that was the only time. Working with Kyrie Sane got her to focus on her freaking family and leave WWE in ring. What she did to Charlotte, what she did to Becky Lynch, even though most of these chicks I'm not a big fan of, at least they're more important than her. Just screw her. Another reason, the over fluctuation of cinematic matches. You made Money in the Bank feel like a comedic YouTube skit. The Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman feud just felt more corny. The bullcrap with the Street Profits and Viking Raiders, with Viking Raiders coming from like war raiding face-painted badasses to just being there and they can do athletic crap plus comedic entertainment. It's just not them. They don't even have a semblance of being taken that seriously now. The Street Profits suck, yet they get the most success. Other than Montez Ford's dumbass hot tags, they have no semblance of charisma. They're forcibly in your face. We're trying to hype over the card. These guys have no semblance of their own difference of personality, and they just can't foil over anybody else. They suck. I'm sick and tired of these guys being ultra talented in the ring. Yes, they're athletic individuals. I'll give them that, but I can't put them in a different show other than WWE. They should have just stayed another year over on NXT. Ricochet sucked over most of the year. Sure, he had a decent little 2019 where he was having good matches with Styles and he was winning the US Championship. But since then, he just came over to getting goddamn jobbed up by Lesnar, knowing that, okay, if indie guys think he's a main eventer, we'll make him a main eventer. Even though he has not that much impressive mic skills, he's not that much of a compulsive actor. He barely has that much chemistry with most of the other wrestlers, and he's just not that inflict on selling any other body part other than just selling a big cutter or move. And now he just came from chasing for the US Championship to jobbing out to Retribution. And plus another suckish part of 2020, Retribution, other than another cool faction out of the frickin' Hurt Business. Legit, cool-ass black men wearing suits, taking all the belts, looking professional, one of the better talkers out of MVP, Lashley, two good athletes out of Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin, and they're dominating, they're taking shit, and they're actually bullying guys. You make factions like that get screen time. You don't make factions like a Retribution that came out off an average thing like destroying private property in a practice facility to getting their own contracts, then you get terribly disguised masks over that barely even give you most of the personality trait over being underdeveloped, and yet Vince gives you contracts. And they could have just forced this down the line of having Vince. They had crappy names. They had crappy call over for talent that are not compulsive talkers. They can barely act, and they just had these crappy, mediocre voice that looks like they were getting skull-effed while trying to do a public speaking assignment. They sucked. Mia Yim sucks. Freaking that guy that kept feuding over with Keith Lee over on NXT, where they kept doing Top Gun hellos even though they're like 250 something pounds or 300 pounds. It's Dominic Dijakovic, Maze, that's Theo Madden. They just had unrevolting personalities, and they just never showed any semblance of dominance. And they came around off this cool thing with a freaking chainsaw. They were taking over both brands, and then they're just now subjugated over to Raw. Just doing nothing. Jobbing up mid-carders after they were supposedly feuding with the Hurt Business to keep them in line. Absolutely garbage. And when we came from an intense heel turn like Roman Reigns, coming back heel over injury, having the most immense acting, best storylines, most interest over watching wrestling matches. He made a concept like a I Quit match plus a Hell in a Cell match exist. It looks cool, it sounded personal, and it made one man come out looking like a badass while the other one looking like a complete pussy. It's freaking awesome. Bayley, it's decent enough that she at least has a more successful reign, even though it's against thin competition. What? She jobbed out Natalia, Naomi, and Nikki Cross for like several months until finally dropping the belt to Sasha Banks. Her promos were minuscule, mediocre, and lacked any semblance of a personality other than her saying, "Ding dong, I'm longest reigning women's champion." And she just kept going over that if she feels more comfortable in a setting where she's going to have a remote crowd, not have that much interaction with the fans, where probably everybody's going to just be silent because they know that she can't find a way how to make herself feel like a dynamic heel. Like the most forgettable thing, and if you're having a long reign and most of your feuds have been like forgettable, other than people finally wanting Sasha to win back the belt, and people is remembering that more because Sasha Banks actually tries to treat herself and look like $1 million. Bayley sucks. Another thing, this whole give Naomi a chance thing, and guess who's the person to call her out to actually try to make something of herself by herself? And that's Booker T, a black man, a former world's champion, two-time Hall of Famer, a man that obviously earned his way over in the top, even though most of the struggles some black wrestlers took in the business. And over what he gotten, you should be taking it up to task to actually get pointers from a man like that. And most of these SJWs take over Naomi's word like they actually remember anything important that Naomi did other than being a funkadactyl. And she put lights on a freaking SmackDown Women's Championship. The only thing is that you suck off one of the Usos and nothing else about you is interesting. They'll be like, oh, but her entrance is cool. It is not cool. It's her just waggily dancing with freaking lights. No other motif into it. I guess it's supposed to show off her personality, but it just sucks. Her theme song is just her saying, MMA, like some 2013 garbage. Fandango's was more memorable. And that was just one beat. And that was over. Nobody ever hummed or like grouply hummed the theme song of Naomi. It's trash. She's forgettable. People are going to remember Cameron more than Naomi Cameron was getting more headlines than Naomi, other than Naomi bitching and complaining why she can't get over, while Cameron was getting notarized over her coming in the women's tag team tournament at AEW. She just sucks. I mean, the only positive thing about her is that she's thick. And there's more talented black females that I know of, like Bianca Belair. But literally, before she even came over to the main roster, she was doing crap with the Royal Rumble, getting like multiple eliminations. She has a distinguished look. She looks athletic, a powerhouse, looks attractive, plus has an ass, and has a hair that she can also use as a weapon. That is more distinguished than just Naomi, that her literal finisher is cheeks. Crappy head scissors, and that she can barely have any semblance of chemistry with any of her workers. She just sucks. I'm sorry to say it, folks. Oh, God. And The Fiend. Sure, The Fiend gained over headlines, but you can't take up that a majority of The Fiend's interest wouldn't be back up to par until later of the year, when he was having Inferno matches with Randy Orton, and back in the world title scene with Braun, and the stuff he was doing with Alexa Bliss. And that was at least gathering some semblance of an interest. The rest of the year was just him doing, "I'm scary, remember when I was over?" Braun. Then he jobbed over to Goldberg. Like, I know, like, there's no semblance of power scaling over in pro wrestling, but it just feels super inconsistent that you lose to an out-of-his-prime Goldberg that looked like he was dying when he was facing The Undertaker back in the Saudi event. By the way, another complaint that I have over 2020. Gimmick pay-per-views need to stop. They just need to stop. Please. I'm begging you. Stop with Extreme Rules. Stop with Elimination Chambers. Make these stipulations matter in the semblance of the situation, not because you just need to have a gimmick pay-per-view. There didn't need to be 3 Hell in a Cell matches on your freaking pay-per-view for Hell in a Cell. Return pay-per-views that actually bring meaning over to the main event or situation or the theme of most of the storylines. Not just do that. That's what made No Mercy cool. That's what made Backlash cool. Judgment Day cool. Armageddon. Full Gear. Unforgiven. That's cool pay-per-view names with meanings in ways over to use the stipulation. It makes no damn difference. No one's gonna wait until freaking February to get an Elimination Chamber. Sure, sometimes it's worth the wait, but you want to bring it over to a situation that, okay, probably some authority figure wants to make sure there's a threat for the world champion or something, so they're gonna put him in an Elimination Chamber match. Or the match has gotten super personal. We needed a Hell in a Cell match to conclude it. No one's gonna be that overwhelmingly spent on waiting until October to see a Hell in a Cell match. It's not gonna be that compelling. If you have 2 men that hate each other so much they nearly want to kill each other, and you're just gonna have them have a regular match or a street fight or something that's gonna end out looking in a false finish, not these guys can actually end with their own hands. That's what made Hell in a Cell so special. That's what made Elimination Chamber so special. 3 stages of Hell so special. Stretcher matches so special. Stuff like that actually feels like we're actually seeing the conclusion over with a feud, especially TLC matches. Now they just name it over with pay-per-views, and I thought this could stop. When they were bringing back pay-per-views like No Mercy and Backlash. Now it's just their pay-per-views, with no semblance of a meaning for all of that. They just bring back the name because it's just a name. Not like they're doing a blockbuster rematch, or they're doing something that somebody in the storyline is going to be against all odds, or some crap like that. And I just wish it would just be, these monthly pay-per-views could at least have some semblance of a meaning other than just being a gimmick. Money in the Bank is underwhelming. It doesn't feel like a big house event because it now has its own pay-per-view. TLC is just the gimmick match, just over to just have a gimmick match. Like, there's no high cost, especially when Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns were having their first title match for, since 2016? an eye for an eye match. Shouldn't be something over for Extreme Rules. And it felt like nobody else was getting that side of treatment, even though Extreme Rules, everything's supposed to be a different stipulation. That shouldn't be the case. Just stop with these gimmick pay-per-views. I wish 2020 hopefully learns over the unsuccess of the gimmick pay-per-views. Seth Rollins. Becky Lynch Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Listen, congrats on the kid. I hope the kid lives to have a great future. And, hopefully you guys, stay together to raise it. Because I know how it is for wrestling relationships. Especially, keeping a marriage while still on the road. Technically, for now. So, these guys were overly shoved over their throats back in 2019. 2020, I guess Rollins had a better focus because now we had a heel persona of just being the Messiah. He only had one good match, and that was Money in the Bank 2020. And then he went over this grudgingly. Sure, it gathered a bit of ratings back on SmackDown, but it just was so disinteresting. It was just a fake eye pop from Mysterio. Lack of any dramatic build over all this, except trying to overly shove Dominic up her ass with just a lack of acting chops. Decent over in the ring, but it just felt like overly dragged out. Rollins didn't look more menacing because he just ended up always getting a comeuppance after. And it just made Dominic just feel like it was just a one-off thing for Mysterio's storyline. And then they just added Murphy now in a relationship that it just looks like they're retconning. They're not focusing on that on SmackDown anymore. That's just my opinion on the matter. Oh God, it just felt super off when we had those developmental guys be our crowd. It just felt so boring. It's like, whose man is this? Oh my God! Everybody's quiet now, dude. It just felt so robotic, and I'd rather with the Thunderdome than have another impromptu crowd of actors. They're not wrestling fans, they're actors. They're not gonna the Vince is not gonna ask them to turn their brain off because they want to sustain their product and pretend that it's good, even though most of it has no story in it. So Vince gotta be like, okay, freaking Lily, sing it. That's my opinion on the matter. Other than that, that's my reasons why 2020 sucks. Hopefully, over to the standpoint, I don't complain about Lana and how much she sucked over having a major storyline earlier over in the year with Rusev, to now Rusev getting released. Her just jobbing out for the last 3 months over with Nia Jax just tossing her over in a table. And she couldn't even be healthy enough to even make it to a pay-per-view. She was supposed to win the belt with Asuka. She can fluctuantly act. She can't even keep a sponsorship to herself. And it just feels like she's a huge major whiner, even though if you can't handle the heat, stay out of social media. Lana seems attractive. Average model body, should stay a manager. I just don't think this wrestling thing was fully over her mind whenever she thought of getting into the business. That's my opinion on the matter. Humberto Carrillo sucked. Most of the top 6 guys, the most guys to get over, is technically just Lacey Evans and Otis. Tucker's now Chris Harris, when he came to WWE CW back in 08, gotten fat with long hair with a lack of any wrestling skill. Aleister Black, and I was probably going to leave because of what happened to Zelina Vega, has no other primordial focus. They just never expanded his character other than who wants to pick a fight with me, and that he was just a random friend for Rey Mysterio when he was getting hurt by Rollins. Humberto Carrillo is just like a AAA guy, no personality, no dynamical look, except he just looks like a wet-haired Hispanic six-pack X-Pac with no semblance of charisma. Lucha House Party stays on television while Humberto Carrillo barely gets any. So that should tell you how talented Humberto Carrillo is. And oh god, just uh I wish I had more over to rant to, but it just sucked. Some of 2020 sucked, even though some of the improvements they did, but those were minuscule improvements over for a crappy 2020. The fan base just continued to be overly toxic. Some idiots even reporting that somehow The Rock and Roman Reigns shouldn't be a WrestleMania main event. Are you shitting me? It's just bad. We have guys embarrassing the fan base of actually being a wrestling fan, and even trying to neglect over opinions, all because they don't think that it's going to work to get a casual audience. And if you want to popularize a show, a fan base, a series, to gain over the mainstream, you need to pick up a person that probably never seen it before and try to make sure that they gain interest enough to make them a fan, to grow more outsiders to watch the show. That's what makes stuff mainstream. I don't think most wrestling fans get that. You get this over Wrestling Otaku. Sometimes some weird podcast, Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez, weirdo fans that probably think that we should treat pro wrestling like it's anime, even though it's part of carny events, been part of mainstream, most people's childhood. Most people, when they talk about luxury being masculine or being cool, they reference a pro wrestler. And over most of that current time, we've lacked over popularity or mainstream credibility for over decades now. That's not a good look. Like, come on. Like, the lack of pro wrestling to be popular has surely declined, man. It's just bad. And most people now averaging like Raw's like averaging like a 1.7, 1.6. Sometimes they'll reach over into 1.8, and probably they'll be like a 2.5 over this Raw reunion. This Raw reunion Part 2 fiasco with the stupid Legends night. And that show sucked. So did Raw 25. So did Raw reunion back in 2019. Because they just have no semblance of trying to grow over a show to actually adapt with current society. And I think that's their issue. I've been hearing that over a lot of people, and sometimes they be right, because some of the guys I be listening to were there when Raw in WCW were like up in mainstream. Were experienced in television before. Had over years in the business, or at least years as a fan, or years wrestling. So those are credible standpoints over why I take their opinion seriously. Even if I don't like to hear it. If I don't think that some of the wrestlers that I like are not getting pushed over to the standard because of what they lack, I'll take that over to consider. I'll take that over anything else, other than I should just tell them to shut up because they're wrong. Oh, God, man. I just wish 2021 will hopefully be an improvement, not only for professional wrestling, but everybody else's way of life, because of how much I'm hearing so much stuff is going to get better probably later in the year. But for right now, I hope everybody's dealing with it the best they can. And remember, this I'm trying to make this as lighter as what it was in 2018, when I was just going all out, but this is just my opinion, and I hope you guys vouch for that. That's it coming from me.